This is part 2 of a series showing you step by step how to install solar panels pretty much by yourself and save tens of thousands of dollars. This is the complete do-it-yourself guide to solar installation. In this video, I will show you the safety equipment and gear that I used, the tools that you will need, and where to get it all.
Okay, so here is a brief overview of some of the equipment and tools that I have been using for this solar install. Here's my dog Zorro, and here's the climbing harness that I have. My house is a two-story house, so I definitely want to have some safety harnesses. Here's the ladder that I've been using. It's a 24-foot, which is just perfect for a two-story house. Got it at either Lowe's or Home Depot, I can't remember, but there it is, 24-foot Warner ladder. Been very impressed with it. Okay, here I am at the top. I also got this ladder extension, which has been just amazing for me, who's not a professional roof climber. Gives me a lot of confidence as I get to the top to be able to step over onto the roof. So I would highly recommend one of these as well. Here you can see the brand, a Safety ladder rail extension. I got this on Amazon. And another really important part of the ladder is this kind of ladder support, I suppose. Also got this at Lowe's. Very helpful to add on. It adds just a lot of stability. Here I have some safety gear that just helps me feel a little bit more comfortable up on the roof. I have a climbing harness that I had previously in a different project that I used building a tree house, climbing carabiner, and a rappelling apparatus. I don't know what it's called, but if I do fall, I'll fall slowly. But the benefit of the rappelling is that you can pull the tail end and it adjusts the size. So wherever part of the roof I'm working at, I can choose how long I need it to be. And then when I'm ready to start working, just take this tail end and tie a quick knot. And then if I fall a little rest to fall, I can untie the knot and slowly rappel the rest of the way down. Okay, so we'll follow the rope to its source, and I'll show you how I hooked it up to the top of the roof. So here we have this, and I got this bracket off of Amazon as well. Screwed it into a joist down below, and have it tied off there with a handy bowline knot. Talking about knots, the thing that makes a nice knot is two things. It's got to hold, and you got to be able to untie it. Any fool can tie a knot that's not going to come loose, but you're never going to be able to untie it. Bowline, easy to tie, easy to untie, and is going to hold all day long. For all the small things, I've got a little rope tied to a bucket down there, and I just pull up and get my little tools and whatnot. The bigger stuff, I'll use my crane. All right, I'm a true do-it-yourselfer, so I'm going to be doing this by myself. But here's my crane. It's a makeshift crane. It's got a 40-pound bag of salt there at the end. Calculated it's around 4 parts of this side of the lever and 1 part there. So we got a 4-to-1 ratio. So it's going to hold 160 pounds at least. The solar panels weigh around 57 pounds, so that should be fine. And of course, I've tested it and jumped on it and made sure that it's going to hold.
I also used quite a few different types of tools, most of which I already had, but you may not have those. So I'm going to go through the list of tools that I used and let you know what I thought was necessary, what was just nice to have, and what you could probably do without. Here's a list of tools that are absolutely necessary for a solar project. I had a cement flat tile roof. I had to have 2 small pry bars to lift those up and pull them out to be able to install the roof mounting brackets. Used a caulking gun to fill in the holes with waterproofing material. I had to have a drill to be able to drill holes into the roof framing to install the roof mounting brackets. I needed a flathead screwdriver to connect the wire leads in the different junction boxes and in my main panels and all the other different electric boxes. I needed a wire snipper or wire cutting pliers to cut the wire to length. You need something to cut the EMT conduit. I used an angle grinder, but if you don't have one of those, you can definitely use a hacksaw, but you'll need something to cut those conduits. And finally, I needed 2 large wrenches, or even just a large set of pliers to tighten up the conduit joints to make them waterproof. You will also need a conduit reaming screwdriver or a file. What these do is they soften the edges after you cut the conduit to size. It leaves a sharp edge when you cut it, so when you pull the wires through, it could tear off some of the protective plastic sheathing, and then it'll cause a short in your system. So you need something to be able to file down or smooth out the sharp cut edges of the metal conduit. Here's some tools that I was using that I found to be very helpful, but not necessarily required. You could probably find workarounds for many of these. I used an MC4 crimper. That crimped the PV wires to the metal inserts in the MC4 connections. You use those MC4 connections to connect the different solar panels to your junction boxes and to each other. Most solar panels are going to come already with the MC4 connections to them, but you will need to connect those various ways throughout the electrical system. So I found this crimper to be very helpful. You probably could use some pliers to get the same job done, but that's not very convenient. A hammer, of course, has 101 uses. If you didn't have a hammer, I suppose you could use one of your large wrenches to bang whatever you needed. I also built a solar panel crane to lift the solar panels to my rooftop. I live in a 2-story house. I saw some videos of people carrying the solar panels on their back up the ladder. I was not going to try that. So I built myself a crane. It was pretty simple design, just a triangle with a lever. And so I found it to be very helpful in lifting up the panels. I did all of them that way, didn't run into any problems. I purchased some 200-pound rope and some larger pulleys at my local hardware store. I used 2 pulleys and I think around 50 or 60 feet of rope. To hold the solar panel stable, I used some old webbing tie downs that I already had. I needed something to find the roof trusses under the plywood of my roof to be able to screw in the lag bolts holding on the solar brackets. Now, I've seen some people be able to use a knock system where they knock on the wood and they're able to find the stud behind it that way. I've never been able to do that, so I just got myself a stud finder. I was not really impressed with this one. There might be better ones out there, but to be honest, I've never found a stud finder that actually works really good for me. If you know one, leave them in the comments below. A battery-powered driver is very helpful to drive the lug bolts into the roof trusses for the roof mounting brackets. Also very helpful to tighten up all of the solar panel clamps to clamp the solar panels onto the rails. I used a Sawzall to cut the ends off of the rails and various other uses. I didn't have a Sawzall for a number of years. I finally got one this last year and I'm finding all sorts of uses for it. Very helpful. But again, if you don't have one, you can just use a hacksaw. Wire strippers are pretty helpful in removing the plastic sheathing around the wires. If you don't have those, you can use a knife or box cutter or something sharp. But it is much more convenient to use a wire stripper. A level helps you determine if you have the solar panels on correctly or in a line. If you don't have that, I've also seen people use strings, and to be honest with you, if I was to do it over again, I probably would use strings to level out my solar panels. Turns out that my roof actually isn't completely level or parallel, so using the level was less helpful. I would use strings in the future. Pulling lubrication is also really helpful to pull the wires through the conduit. If you have any kind of turns at all, Lubrication makes a huge difference. Also, a shop vac I found to be a useful tool in pulling the wires. I just send a little cotton ball with a string tied to it, suck it through the wires that I need to pull through, and then on the far end tie the wires to the string that is now all the way through the conduit, and give it a good pull with that lubrication, and it comes right through. One alternative method to running your wire through the complete conduit run is simply running the wires through a single section of the conduit or smaller sections of the conduit as you're connecting them. Here are some tools that I used or tried to use but aren't necessary for the project. The first is a conduit bender. I tried to bend the conduit in the form that I needed and I failed spectacularly. I was not able to do it, so I went ahead and returned it and ended up using the pre-bent 90-degree angles, and when I needed less than a 90-degree angle, I just cut it off at whatever angle I needed it and connected it with the watertight seals. That is probably a little bit more expensive, not much, and I was not able to figure out the conduit bender. I had a pallet jack that I used to move the whole pile of solar panels to the side of my house. The delivery driver would have dropped it off in my garage if I'd asked them. They usually won't be willing to take it to the side of your house or the back of your house. But if worse comes to shove, you can just carry each panel individually to where you need it to rest until you're ready to raise them to the roof. I used a rope and harness and a roof anchor. I'm just not very experienced in working on the roof, and so I was really nervous about it, and my wife was nervous about it, so I went ahead and did that. You might not even need that if you feel confident up on a roof. I also used a grinder for cutting off some of the different pieces. I ended up having to use it also to cut off some bolts that were a little bit too long to tighten up. But you could use a hacksaw just as easily. A little bit more time, a little more effort, but also useful. I also had a torque wrench to make sure that I got the bolts at the proper pressure. I ended up not even needing it. My driver used the right amount of pressure to get the bolts to what they needed to be on the solar panel clamps to make sure that they don't blow off or whatnot. So the types of tools you need are pretty common, and other than my ladder setup, the tools are not very expensive if you don't have them. Now that we know the types of tools we need, and we have all of our safety equipment, in the next video I'll show you how to install the rails and roof mounting hardware. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel, and check out my other videos in this series, The Complete Do-It-Yourself Guide to Solar Installation.